Are there things, though, that the government can do to encourage the private sector? And I'll mention things like a carbon price. Should we adopt that? A carbon tax or a border adjustment tax? Should we be taking action like that that will really harness the power of the private sector and let the markets work and do some of the work for you?
Well, there are a lot of advocates in the United States Congress for pricing carbon in different ways. There are different thoughts about how to do it. President Biden, I know, is particularly interested in evaluating the border adjustment mechanism. He wants to look at that and see whether that's something that we need to deploy. Europe is already looking at that in depth and may well wind up deploying it if they don't get satisfaction from China and other countries with respect to the transition off of coal and their effort to try to do their part in reducing emissions. And there is in the negotiations on climate, David, a concept called, common but differentiated responsibility, because the more developed countries were ahead of everybody else, and the developing nations needed a certain room to be able to move. There was this notion that, well, there's a common responsibility to deal with climate, but a differentiated response. That is increasingly, I think, disappearing in the sense that the new technologies allow those other countries to leapfrog and to go directly to some of this new technology and deploy it. But they need finance and help to be able to do that. One of the things that this money that's being allocated by these banking institutions can do is help leverage different behavior from some of these countries by saying, we have money ready to invest, but you've got to do the following things in order for us to be able to do it. And you have either blended finance or other mechanisms by which you lower the risk and make it more attractive to the private capital to be able to cut a commercial deal with an appropriate power purchase agreement that's for long enough and big enough and strong enough that it's attractive to do it. This is where government can be helpful. There are other incentives that could be put in place. For example, even with President Trump in place and a Republican Senate, they did extend the tax credit for solar and renewable. And that's had a profound impact on helping to deploy much more solar in America. Even while President Trump was in office, opposed and pulling out of the Paris Agreement, you saw emissions reduced in America. You saw 37 governors continue to live by the Paris Agreement, Republican and Democrat alike, and you also saw more than 1,000 mayors of both parties who drove their cities to try to live up to the Paris Agreement. So I think this is here to stay. I think the economic power of this capital investment that's going to take place in these new possibilities is something that no politician could reverse. It's not ideological. It's not got a party label. It's happening because of supply and demand and the market, and I think it's inevitable.